Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. Truth be told, I was talking to a bunch of people at lunch the other day about heaven. What would heaven look like if you could go to heaven? What would the ideal heavenly existence be? And I wasn't kidding when I said it, and I think everybody thought I was. And if I was to describe heaven to somebody, I would say it would be being with my family on South Bass Island in Lake Erie, and reading books like at our RV, just having a clean day with not a whole lot of people that can take your time, and just having a clean day to read and not have much else to do, and just be around the people that I care about and let them have fun and do things, and give me about 9 or 10 hours straight in my reading chair at my RV on South Bass Island with a full refrigerator of snacks and my own little personal, I have like a little reading space where I set up an outside part of the camp under the awning, let everybody come and go as they want, and just let me read. Let me read books like this one, which is, I got this at the museum. Just talked about the little turning point, the War of 1812. There's a memorial there to Oliver Hazard Perry, and I tend to like books that I get from all museums, and they have a good one there that talks about the War of 1812. And this one is important because this is a book about naval warfare written by Teddy Roosevelt, and I'll read anything that Teddy Roosevelt wrote. And it's essentially an analysis of the naval strategies of the War of 1812 and how some of the pinnacle battles were fought and won against the English on the lake, the maneuvers as they occurred. You see, you get to just sit there and study these kinds of things for hours on end. And that to me, more charts and descriptions in the book about who did what and when and where the sun was and how they pitched their sails to catch the wind and gain the timing depending on what time of day it was, how they managed their water supply, how much weight each ships that they were navigating was carrying. It's just fun, great stuff. Just a wonderful book, and I love this book. And I look at all these great statistics. Teddy Roosevelt was just a really good student of history, and at the time, the War of 1812, it was only a century past, and when he wrote this book, but he was interested enough in the warfare, studying strategy, to write a book about it. Of course, that would be consequential to his own presidency. But all those great charts, to me, that's heaven. That's wonderful. But what makes it wonderful? The information is interesting. But as I say that, look at all these footnotes. Look at all that great stuff. Just go and read. And if you had an infinite amount of time and not a whole lot of people demanding your time, what a wonderful way to spend your time. And again, South Bass Island with your RV, over off the ferry, isolated from the world a little bit. Family can do whatever they want. You can take time to go have some lunch with them and spend some time with them as they sightsee. But just give me 7 or 8 hours of a day there with the full refrigerator and this kind of tidbits, and I can't imagine a better life. And I think that's heaven as heaven could possibly be conceptually. But the thing with books like that is we've had a period in human history where we've followed a trajectory of human consciousness. And battles like that could occur as long as you had sovereignty. So you had one sovereign nation fighting another sovereign nation. Or the Bible battles. A kingdom fighting another kingdom. And you had a whole society of people who were willing to pledge allegiance to that king or that country. And for a lot of our written history, that's the way it's been until the advent of free speech. Pretty much an American idea. The rest of the world's kind of looking for it, asking for it. But this idea of people having free speech changed the nature of warfare forever. And it will never return to this kind of stuff. So you can read about all these naval battles. There'll never be naval battles like that again, where you have a sovereign nation maneuvering another sovereign nation on a lake or an ocean. They might go through the motions of it. You might see carrier groups like what Trump's doing now with Venezuela or off the coast of Mexico, sort of bringing muscle memory back to people who have studied these things for years and giving the appearance of war, but that's not how you fight war. You fight war through free speech now. You fight war through perception. That's why if you're going to study naval battles or warfare at all, and Teddy Roosevelt certainly did a great job of looking at how battles were fought and how they were won and what kind of fortifications had to be put up to essentially gain victory, at all those maneuvers. What we have a hard time with now is translating these kinds of physical battles into the psychological battles of modern First Amendment warfare. Where the intention of the battle, in this case, you would sink the other person's ships until they said uncle. And then everybody agreed on the terms of surrender, and somebody declared victory. Essentially, you rain out assets, and someone had to bend the knee to somebody else. When you're dealing with agreed sovereignties, you can do that. But the modern battles now, using free speech, takes away the ability to have everybody as a sovereign commitment to each other. So like this issue in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where you have essentially trained insurrectionists who are trying to commit sedition behind a free speech movement, throwing themselves in front of ICE agents, just like kamikaze pilots would have done to throw themselves into ships, just like ISIS members would car bomb a subject or commit suicide in order to, for some greater cause. Or the 9/11 terrorists would run airplanes into buildings for some purpose that they thought was worth sacrificing themselves for. Now you have a weaponized culture of angry white liberal women who have been scandalized by progressive institutions into making mistakes that would push them to seek social redemption through social justice causes. So in order to give meaning to their lives and their bad decisions up to that point, they rally themselves to destroy the judgments that cast against their bad decisions. To erase that, they join these social causes and become weaponized the way all these other terrorist groups do. And they hide that effort behind the First Amendment, saying, well, we have a right to peacefully protest, but there's nothing peaceful about blocking roads. There's nothing peaceful about the means that they've occurred to push back against ICE orders to detain illegal immigration and to turn it back where they came from. The assault against the United States and against European tourism in general has been to use Islam to push out Christianity. It's a reverse Crusades kind of thing, or a continuation of the Crusades. It's a continuation of the same battle, where you have two sides of a biblical narrative in conflict for social power control and how you determine sovereignty of a nation. And when you're still defining nations the way nations were defined in strategy books like this one, you're not going to win because you're learning the wrong strategies. The same maneuvers that outflanked the English in these Lake Erie campaigns that eventually put the victory in the category of the Americans. You have to adapt to the changing terrain, and that terrain now is psychological, not physical. And that's how the bad guys have been hiding their maliciousness and their intent to create sedition by saying that their seditious activities are a free speech right, and that their intentions are to undermine the basic foundations of society, even if it's burning a flag or it's destroying the Christian nature, a biblical understanding of the people who founded the country, and totally turning that on its head so you can undermine the walls of the country at its foundation. The intent is a seditious one and a treasonous one, and one that you have to deal with on that level, and you can't allow it to reside hidden behind a free speech debate, because it's a guerrilla tactic that they've adapted to around free speech, and it is the exact battle that's being played all across the world. That's why the way you beat like Iran is you turn their people against them and you let them know you've got their back. It's not the ships where you're taking over the sovereign country, because you're not fighting a sovereign country. You're fighting the ideological warfare that's hiding behind the sovereignty, like of Mexico. Clearly, there's no president of Mexico. There's an appointed straw person, and then the cartels run everything behind it. And you don't deal with the front person because you're not dealing with the actual criminals who are running everything. If you go where they tell you to go by chasing your puppet presidents, then you're never gonna get the cartels reined in. So the way you deal with it is you put pressure on them. You inspire people who are already in a state of revolt to revolt against their power structures, and then let them know you have their back. That's why it was important to take Venezuela the way they did, because now there's hopes in Hong Kong, there's hopes in Mexico, there's hopes in Iran, everywhere in the world, even in Russia and Ukraine. Everywhere where there's discontent, now people see that America can come in and take a leader out the way they did, and you strip away that hiding place where all these real bad actors are creating sedition by hiding behind liberals who are discontent and are willing to weaponize themselves on the front line, while the real bad guys hide in the background. And until you understand that that's how the plays are called in this modern warfare, and if you're going to try and deal with them squarely by battleships and troops and thinking that Pentagon budgets are going to do it for you alone, you've got to understand the real battle. If you're going to learn anything from books like this and learn from a former president that wrote a lot of strategy on military maneuvers, that's why it's great. It's fun to read. It's fun to contemplate, but you got to adapt it to the realities of modern warfare, and those are psychological, not physical. So if you want to fight and win these wars, I think the Trump approach is inspire rebellions everywhere to overthrow the puppet governments that are in the way of solving the real success, because the liberal world order resides in the background through institutions like World Economic Forum and other big banking institutions that prop up all the different sides of the coin so they can play each other against each other and profit off the demise. You're never going to get there until you stop that game, and you can't stop that game until people take away the token governments. And that's certainly the case in Iran. That's certainly the case in Hong Kong. And that's certainly what's going to happen in Mexico, and it's what's happening in Venezuela and everywhere else in the world. And when you talk about starting World War III will never be about, you're already in World War III. It will never be about sending tanks and troops to some faraway country like everyone's afraid of and having blood and spoils at other people's expense. It's going to be about sovereignty and whether nations actually represent their populations. And when you have all these countries taken over by election fraud, and people are not represented by the governments that have them, and then those governments are then beholden to financial nefarious pirates and criminal cartels, gangsters, like we find the drug trade. And they use the governments of the world to hide their profit mechanisms, and they maintain power through election fraud. The only way to bring them down is inspire people to overtake their own countries and make themselves sovereign and make their governments honorable to them. And you only do that by showing that America can do it. And that's the example that you show to the world so they can do it. And if they're going to do it, America will be there to back them up and take away their dictators if only they have the courage to overthrow them. And that's the fight that we're in. And if you need it to be more clear, it's playing out in Minnesota. The actions there are clearly seditious. Those who are teaching those people to become seditious are criminals at every level that's happening in the world. And if you're going to beat them, you beat them by inspiring people to stand up for themselves and show them that you'll have their backs if they get in trouble, which is exactly what the Trump administration policy is, and it's what we voted for. Yes, we voted for the kind of violence we're seeing in Minneapolis, and what we're seeing in Venezuela, and what we're seeing in Iran, and we want to see in Hong Kong. We do not want to have people submitting to criminal conspiracies, trying to hide behind legitimate government through election fraud and force. And if you really want to win that war, which we need to, you got to fight it for the way it really is, not the way you'd like it to be. And you can read about these battles, these naval battles, the War of 1812 or World War II or World War I and Civil War or the biblical battles, all you want. But the goal of battle is to use power and leverage to influence the other party to do what you need them to do, and whoever capitulates to that will wins. And the battle now is to inspire other nations to live up to the American example and to overthrow their tyrannical regimes through our example and through the ability to rescue them if they get in trouble and show a willingness to do so. And that will inspire them to overthrow righteously the shackles that confine them. And that's the battles we're fighting today, and how you define victories from losses. And we need a whole lot more victory. Anyway, Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you ever read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.